Thanks for coming by. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to install our ARB air compressor. We also have a mount to throw it under the hood. I went with the ARB single. I had this on my previous Jeep. It worked really well and was reliable. I only plan on going 33-inch tires, so this is more than enough to air them up quickly. This compressor will also do air lockers if you have those. It requires quite a bit of assembly though, so we'll get to that. Now we'll open this guy up. Got our instructions, air compressor itself, all our switches, pressure sensor, relay, filter, some washers, and our wiring loom. The only other thing you should need for this install is some Teflon tape and Allen wrenches. Laid the bracket in here, seeing how this fits in here. We're gonna have to turn this mount around. Luckily this is super modular and you can flip stuff around and adjust this thing really well. Then I got a switch that I'm gonna put out here instead of trying to run a switch inside. I'll eventually get an S-Pod that goes right here and probably run that into the cab. But until then, we'll just use this switch outside. So let's get some holes drilled and we'll get this flipped around the other way. So what we've run into here is we have these two Allen keys that tighten the sleeve down and hold the air compressor in place. It needs to be loose to adjust it to where it needs to be. Where we're trying to put it gets us where we can't get to the bolts here to tighten it back up. So we're gonna pop these bolts off here, slide this out, turn it the other way so that it adjusts this way instead. So now our bolts are open to be adjusted. Just a few 10mm bolts here to get this off and adjusted. Now with all those bolts off, we can slide the air compressor out and put it back in the opposite side. So now it'll be rotated the other way when we adjust. We'll get this all put back together like we pulled it apart. All right, that's all switched around. Next we'll move to the mounting plate. This switch just needs a little 1/2-inch hole drilled. So we're gonna drill a hole, sadly, right next to where the other hole was because that one's not big enough. And then we'll get our switch installed. Well, we'll see how many of our $5 Harbor Freight drill bits we break today. First we'll find a spot in the metal. Gonna just have a look. That looks pretty centered. Use our punch a couple times. Got a good starter. All the rest of our drill bits have broken, so we're starting with 11/64 to get a small pilot hole drilled. These are cheap throwaway drill bits, but I like to make things last as long as I can, so I'll put a little oil there to cool the drill bit. And we'll go up a couple sizes. A few more sizes. Our goal is to get to 1/2-inch for that switch. Yeah, I'll just jump up to 1/2-inch. There we go. We've got a 1/2-inch hole. Our hole's all done. It's a bit rough around the edges though, so we'll grab a file and get the burrs off the edges. Nothing feels sharp, good enough for a switch. Throw some spray paint on this guy, help it not rust a bit in the future. So to make it easier to use an air hose on this, I bought their little proprietary ARB air chuck thing. It's got rubber around here. This air compressor gets really hot since it's so small. This will keep you from burning your hands. Then went to the hardware store and got some brass fittings. You can get stainless instead and save some money. This is all the store had though. And then the air regulator that it comes with. We'll get all that installed on the air compressor here. ARB also makes a kit that comes with a piece instead of needing two pieces, and an air hose and this and a couple other things. It's like $90 though. Maybe I'll link it, or maybe I'll put a picture up here. Whereas this cost me $12 for this fitting, and I think $12 total for these, so like maybe 24 bucks. I could have got by with cheaper hardware as well, but I wanted something that's going to last, so I got brass. Here we go. Up on top of the compressor, there's a hole here in this rubber thing. This is where the air outlet is. We'll pop that little rubber guy out. For this, you're going to want some thread tape. Stuff's really easy to use. All you do is think about which way you're screwing this. Then you take your thread tape and lay it the opposite direction. So if I'm screwing right, it's going to end up going this way. Do 3 or 4 layers on here. Try not to get it past the end of the fitting. The stuff will get in your air system. Just pull at the end. So we've got our thread tape laying so that it will lay down as we screw the direction that it goes. Hopefully that makes sense. We'll get this tightened up. With air fittings, you don't need to like break your back trying to do this. I'm going to use a cloth here so I don't mar this up very much. Screw this down hand tight and you're good enough. So the way I want this to fit on here is that the chuck is at the very end. Then I'll take the air sensor and put it down below so that it can run next to the other wiring. So we'll get some tape on our chuck as well. Same thing, think about which way you're tightening and then let the tape run the opposite direction. Again, we'll just grab one in with a plier, give that a little tightening with our hand, and it's good enough. And finally, our air pressure regulator. Same thing, think about which way you're screwing it in. Run your tape the opposite direction. And then finally, we'll tape the whole piece. That was sort of tight. We'll give it one more spin here. And that should be plenty tight. Next we have the wiring. Don't let this scare you too much. It comes with a very nice wiring diagram. I'm going to do things a little differently, so I'm making it more complicated than it needs to be. Normally you just take the ends here and put them in a clip. Then you attach the clip to the switch harness. This gives you an easy ignition wire and illumination wire for your switch. I'm using a simpler switch in a different place, so I don't need any of this. Instead, I'm just going to use this red wire, run a wire over to the battery, and put it on an ignition switched fuse. The rest of this is really easy. They already have the end for you. You just put the relay on the end. Red goes on red side of battery. Both blacks go on the black side of the battery. And then our red and blues go onto the pressure switch. So what we're going to do first is this blue wire is what tells the pressure sensor to turn on or off the air compressor. So we're going to cut this wire and splice in a switch to it. I'm going to use butt connectors that have glue in them to help make this weather tight since it's in an engine bay. There we go, glue's all melted. I'll throw some shrink wrap on it. Now we'll drill a quick hole in the side of the box here. At some point I'll remember to come back and silicone this shut, maybe, probably not. And now we can put our fuse tap in and run our wire out. So Now we're going to install our fuse tap here. This is so the air compressor will only turn on when the ignition is on. I looked through my fuses here and found the heated seats. I'm just going to pop that fuse out. Then we'll take our fuse tap, replace the spot with the old fuse, then we'll put our fuse tap into the old spot. So now this will run like the old fuse, and then it also adds a wire that is now fused. And we'll wire up the fuse tap to the harness real quick here. To get our mount on, we need a 13mm deep socket. These two bolts holding the brake booster in, I think they just need to be loosened a bit. And then that plate will slide right behind it. I'll do one last test fit to make sure everything fits. I'm going to run the washer underneath everything instead of up and around. Then I'm running all the power over the top. Looks like everything's going to fit. We'll pull this out and we'll bolt the compressor to it. Here's my gift here from a friend. Way nicer than any of the tools I own. Let's try and pretend everything's all straightened up here. All right, we'll go see if this fits on the Jeep. Let's get some wiring done here. I don't tend to use a lot of electrical tape. This is sort of a rubber that when you stretch it will stick to itself. It's not adhesive in any way though. It just seems to last much longer in engine bays and out in the sun and stuff. So we'll get this wiring wrapped up a little. Get all these wires facing the same direction so we don't end up with a pinched wire. I'll leave a link in the description to this rubber stuff. So if we leave this open, water's just going to get down in here and sit in there. So I'm going to close the end of this up. The more you stretch this, the better it sticks to itself. There, we should have a pretty waterproof connection there. I saw this on another video, so I'm going to steal it and borrow this as a mounting place for this. You have a bunch of other relays already mounted here, it looks like. We're closing in on it. Over, under, around, behind, up, unscrew. Oh, it's interesting they don't give you a thing to keep that from tearing up your paint. Well, our bolts that are sticking out here at the top, so I guess I'll go chop those off real quick. Well, let's see if we can fit it in there after cutting those bolts off. We're still definitely making contact, but that's good enough. All this wiring is going to be a huge pain. All right, I think I've kind of come up with a route. The wires are going to go up and around, back, I'm going to attach this so it's still easy access to get to in case I need to switch. I'll run it up to the air conditioning lines here. I'll run the air conditioning sometime, make sure these don't get extreme temperatures. We're all doing this so I can get these back to the switch and get this to the power. Let's see if we can get this in here now. Under, over, nope, you go under. You, I'll just run you later. Gee whiz. Under, over, over, under. Oh, my back. There we go. In one clip. And the other clip. In that. There we go. Just maybe. We're sort of in a... Still sort of get to the brake fluid when we need to. Oh man, that's something. All right. Used to the TJ with endless room. This thing doesn't have much room under here. There just isn't enough room to do this. Can I even remotely get to my bolts now? So we're going to our switch right here. I'll leave a little slack for when I rewire this someday. You're on, you're on. Get our extension over here. Uh-oh, hang on before we do that. Can I get to those? I cannot. So let's undo that. Almost made an oopsie. Pretty much as straight ahead as we can. Okay. Turns out you can't get to the adjustment bolts with all of this in. I'll tighten those down before we clamp down the bracket. Take our switch screws out. It's going to be a miracle if all this works. All right, before we go zip tying this together like crazy, let's make sure everything works here. Oh, you need a little more slack this way. Last thing to do here is hook up the battery. Jeep gives these nice bolts here to hook auxiliaries up to. Just pull that off. Put our wire on. And tighten it down. I definitely do this by hand. You just barely want these just snug enough that things don't move around. And we'll do the positive. About all you have to worry about with this is if something is touching the positive, don't let it bump any of the frame of the vehicle, but all the stuff's covered really well in here. Same thing with this, pull the bolt off. And tighten it back down by hand. Just snug enough that things don't move around. Now we'll head back over and test it out. Accessories on, and our switch. Heck yeah, we got it working. Finish this switch being in here. Now to clean up this rat's nest. A final overview of everything here. So we have our positive and negative hooked up. We have a signal wire running that will only turn on when the ignition is on. All that runs up and behind the engine, over to the air compressor. We have a switch in line so that it has to also be on in order for the relay to trigger. And that will finally send power to the air compressor and turn everything on. So we've got our air compressor all installed. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Leave a comment if you have a question or think I could have done something better. Finally, you don't need an air compressor to go on an adventure. So get out there and see the stars!